Warren Buffett, the world's greatest investor, built his fortune through concentration. His top 5 holdings represent more than 75% of Berkshire Hathaway's equity portfolio. At one point, Apple alone was more than 40% of the portfolio. He has famously said that diversification is protection against ignorance, implying that if you know what you are doing, you should concentrate. And yet, in his most recent letter outlining what should happen after his death, Buffett told the trustee managing his wife's inheritance to put 90% in an S&P 500 index fund and 10% in short-term government bonds. Not Berkshire Hathaway. Not 5 carefully chosen stocks. An index fund. The man who built the greatest concentrated investment record in history told the people he loves most to diversify completely. Why? What does Buffett know that makes him invest one way and advise the rest of the world another way? And which approach is right for you? John Bogle, the founder of Vanguard and the inventor of the index fund, had a simpler answer. Don't look for the needle in the haystack. Buy the haystack. Hold everything. Pay nothing in fees. Let the market do the work. Over 20-year periods, Bogle's approach beats approximately 90% of active managers, including most of those running concentrated portfolios. 2 of history's greatest investors. Opposite strategies. Both right, for different reasons. This video explains the real difference, the specific mathematics behind each approach, and, most importantly, which one is right for you. The case for concentration. In Buffett's own logic, Buffett's argument for concentration rests on one premise. If you have done the analytical work to understand a business deeply, its competitive advantages, its management, its financial durability, its long-term earnings power, then spreading your capital across 50 or 100 companies dilutes your best ideas with your worst ideas. The concentrated investor is making a claim. I understand this business better than the market does. The market has mispriced it. My edge is knowledge, and the more capital I allocate to my best ideas, the better my returns will be. Buffett's actual investment process supports this. He has read annual reports for decades. He understands insurance economics, consumer brand moats, and railroad economics at a depth that few investors in the world can match. When he is concentrated in something, he genuinely knows it. His partner, Charlie Munger, said it even more directly. Most investment ideas are not worth acting on. The few that are worth acting on deserve large capital allocations. The multi-stock portfolio is mostly mediocrity diluting excellence. The case for diversification, in Bogle's own logic, Bogle's argument for diversification rests on a different premise. You probably do not have an edge. Neither does the professional fund manager. The evidence is overwhelming and consistent. Approximately 85 to 90% of actively managed funds underperform their benchmark index over 15 years after fees. If professional investors with teams of analysts, decades of experience, and unlimited access to company management cannot systematically beat the index, what is the probability that a retail investor holding 10 stocks can? Bogle's insight was not that concentration is wrong in theory. It is that the precondition for concentration to work, a genuine, sustained informational or analytical edge, is essentially impossible to possess and maintain for most investors. Without the edge, concentration is not a strategy, it is a risk. The index fund captures the average return of all companies in the market. Over long periods, the market's average return, minus the low cost of the index fund, beats most active approaches. Not because diversification is magic, because the alternative requires an edge that most people do not have. Here is the vault. The specific concentration level, where adding more stocks stops meaningfully reducing portfolio risk, and the number is much lower than most investors think. The mathematics of diversification. Portfolio risk has two components: systematic risk, market risk. The risk of the overall market moving, recessions, interest rate changes, geopolitical events. This risk affects all stocks and cannot be diversified away. Unsystematic risk, company-specific risk, the risk that a specific company fails. Bad management, competitive disruption, fraud, product failure. This risk can be diversified away by holding enough different companies. Research consistently shows that approximately 90% of the diversifiable risk is eliminated by holding 20 to 30 stocks across different sectors. Adding the 31st stock reduces risk by a tiny fraction of what the first 30 did. Adding the 100th stock reduces risk by essentially nothing measurable. This means a portfolio of 20 to 30 carefully chosen stocks across different sectors and geographies is approximately as diversified, in terms of risk reduction, as a portfolio of 500 or 9,000 stocks. The marginal benefit of additional stocks beyond 20 to 30 approaches zero. What this means for the Buffett versus Bogle debate: the choice is not really between 10 stocks and 9,000 stocks. The choice is option A, 20 to 30 stocks, carefully chosen, actively researched, captures approximately 90% of the mathematical diversification benefit while still allowing meaningful stock selection. This is what serious long-term investors like Buffett's disciples practice. Requires genuine research, requires genuine conviction, requires the discipline to sit through volatility. Option B, 500 to 9,000 stocks via index fund. Captures 100% of the mathematical diversification benefit, requires zero research, zero stock selection, and eliminates the risk of being wrong about any individual company. Costs 0.20% annually in fees. The difference between option A and option B is not mathematical risk. It is the stock selection skill required to generate alpha, above market returns, in option A. If you have that skill, option A may be superior. If you do not, option A just adds company-specific risk, without the compensating return. The specific number, 15 to 20 well-chosen stocks across different sectors, is where the risk reduction benefit of diversification is approximately captured without requiring 9,000 holdings. This is the concentration sweet spot for an investor who genuinely wants to pick stocks. The most dangerous trap in concentrated investing is survivorship bias. We remember the concentrated portfolio winners: Warren Buffett, Peter Lynch, Stan Druckenmiller, and the handful of concentrated investors who produced extraordinary records. We do not remember the thousands of concentrated investors who were wiped out by the same philosophy applied with less skill or worse luck. The Nortel warning, the most Canadian example possible. In 2000, Nortel Networks, a Canadian telecommunications company, represented approximately 35% of the entire TSX Composite Index. If you held the TSX Index in 2000, you were 35% invested in a single stock, not by choice, but because it had grown to dominate the index. Nortel went from a peak market cap of approximately $370 billion, briefly making it the most valuable company in the world by some measures, to bankruptcy in 2009. Its stock went to zero. The Canadian investor who held the TSX index in 2000 to 2002 lost approximately 50% of their portfolio value, not because they made a bad individual stock decision, but because the index itself was dangerously concentrated in a single company at the peak of the dot-com bubble. This is the Nortel warning. Concentration risk is not only a risk you consciously choose, it can sneak into your portfolio through index concentration, through sector tilts, or through the natural drift of a portfolio where winners become an increasingly large share over time. The distinction between intelligent concentration and dangerous concentration. Buffett's concentration is the result of exhaustive research, understanding of durable competitive advantages, and decades of pattern recognition that most investors cannot replicate. The retail investor who puts 40% of their TFSA into a single stock because it has gone up recently is not practicing Buffett-style concentration. They are practicing survivorship bias-driven speculation, selecting from the winners they already know about, and betting that the winning will continue. The concentrated portfolio that beats the market requires not just picking winners. It requires picking winners the market has not yet fully priced. In a market where thousands of professional analysts cover every major stock, the probability that a part-time retail investor consistently identifies mispriced opportunities is very low. The index fund evidence, Bogle's case. Over any 20-year period, the S&P 500 index has outperformed approximately 90% of actively managed funds. This is not because passive investors are smarter. It is because active managers collectively are the market, meaning their average return before costs equals the index. After costs of 1% to 2% annually, the average active manager must underperform by the fee. Mathematically, the average active manager cannot beat the index after costs. The few who do in any given year are not reliably the same ones the next year. The concentration evidence, the specific case for fewer holdings. Research by Robert Hagstrom, the Warren Buffett portfolio, found that randomly selected 15-stock portfolios outperformed randomly selected 250 stock portfolios over most time periods, because the smaller portfolio had a higher probability of containing the best performers at significant weights. This seems to support concentration. But the key word is randomly selected. When professional stock pickers deliberately select concentrated portfolios, the evidence flips. Their concentrated selections underperform diversified indexes at approximately the same rate as other active strategies. The paradox resolved, skill is the variable. The evidence is entirely consistent once you understand the skill requirement. A randomly concentrated portfolio of 15 stocks may outperform a diversified portfolio purely through mathematical probability. The best stocks have more weight. A deliberately concentrated portfolio selected by someone without genuine edge underperforms the index. The concentrated bets are not systematically better than the index. A deliberately concentrated portfolio selected by someone with genuine sustained analytical edge, Buffett, Munger, Lynch, may significantly outperform the index. The question is not concentration versus diversification. The question is, do you have the edge? The Kelly criterion, the mathematical framework for bet sizing. The Kelly criterion is a mathematical formula for optimal bet sizing when you have a known edge. Even with a strong edge, Kelly recommends never going all in. The formula consistently recommends partial position sizes even under the most favorable odds. The implication, even if you have a genuine analytical edge in stock selection, the mathematics of position sizing argues against extreme concentration. Fractional Kelly positions, 25% to 50% of the mathematical optimum, are most commonly used by sophisticated investors, producing strong returns with lower volatility. The honest framework. 4 questions. Question 1. Do you have a genuine, sustained analytical edge? Be ruthlessly honest. An edge means you systematically know something about a company's future earnings power that the collective wisdom of thousands of professional analysts has not already priced in? If the answer is yes, and you can demonstrate it with a track record, not just a feeling, concentration is a legitimate strategy. If the answer is no or uncertain, diversification is correct. Question 2. How much time can you dedicate to research? Buffett reads annual reports 500-plus pages long. He talks to management teams. He models businesses across decades. Legitimate concentrated stock picking requires hours per week per position. Indefinitely. If you have that time and genuinely enjoy it, concentrated stock picking may be appropriate. If you have a career, a family, and limited time, the index fund is not the inferior alternative. It is the rational choice. Question 3. What is your psychological relationship with volatility? A concentrated portfolio in 15 stocks will experience significantly higher volatility than XEQT, even though the long-run mathematical risk is similar. Individual companies can fall 50 to 80% in severe market conditions. A stock picker who sells during a 50% drawdown crystallizes the loss and undermines the entire strategy. If you cannot hold through extreme single-stock volatility, concentration will produce worse outcomes than its mathematics would suggest. Question 4. What is your core purpose? If your core purpose is to build wealth reliably over 20 to 30 years to retire comfortably, XEQT at 0.20%, MER, is very likely the right answer. If your core purpose is to participate actively in markets, to learn deeply about specific businesses, and to potentially generate alpha over a long period, a concentrated approach of 15 to 20 well-researched stocks may be more appropriate alongside a core index position. The practical answer for most Canadian investors, a core satellite approach, 70 to 80% in a broad index ETF, XEQT or VEQT as the core, and 20 to 30% in 8 to 15 individual stocks where you have conviction and have done genuine research as the satellite. This approach captures the index return on the core, the Bogle approach. Allows stock selection without betting the whole portfolio, the Buffett approach, scaled appropriately. Limits the damage if the satellite underperforms. Satisfies the intellectual engagement of stock picking without compromising retirement security. The Buffett versus Bogle debate has a resolution, and Buffett himself gave it to us. Buffett is right. If you have a genuine, sustained analytical edge, concentration amplifies that edge into superior returns. His track record proves it. Charlie Munger's track record proves it. Bogle is right. Most investors do not have that edge, and without it, concentration is just risk. 90% of professional managers cannot consistently beat the index. The probability that a part-time retail investor can do what they cannot is very low. The Vault told you the specific number. 15 to 20 stocks across different sectors captures approximately 90% of the mathematical diversification benefit. You do not need 9,000 stocks to be diversified, but you do need the edge to justify holding 15 instead of 9,000. The Nortel warning told you the danger. Concentration risk can come for you even through an index, and the concentrated investor who is wrong faces permanent capital impairment that the index investor does not. The honest answer for most Canadians, XEQT as the core. If you want to pick stocks, do it with a small satellite portion, with genuine research, with 15 to 20 positions minimum, and with the discipline to hold through 50% single stock drawdowns. If you cannot commit to all three of those, stay with the index. Bogle's haystack has made more Canadian investors wealthy than Buffett's concentrated approach ever will. Not because it is better, but because it does not require anything most people cannot sustain.